Hi, welcome back. This is the third video in our No Place Like Home talk about parrots. Thank you for joining us again. I hope you've enjoyed the videos and the exercises and activities so far. So we've already covered how home is a place for health and how home is a place for safety. So next, we're going to talk about home being a place for families and what that means for our birds. Of course, in the wild, the family would be their flock, right? Because most parrots that are found in our homes will hang out with other birds in the wild. So they have that sense of flock. And of course, we invite them into our homes to become part of our family. I really like this section. I like this idea about birds being a part of the family, because when you think about it, when I think about families, often there's a range of individuals in a family, right? And you're going to have things in common, and you're going to have some things that aren't in common at all. So it's unlike our selected friends and things that we hang out with. Family is often kind of a grouping of people that we love very much and that we appreciate as individuals, but can be very similar or very different from us. And that's kind of like our birds, right? Because they're very different than us. They're wired so differently from us, but we still appreciate and value them as part of the family for the individuals, the unique individuals that they are. So one of the most common reasons we get when people are thinking about parting with a bird, one of the most common reasons they cite is not enough time. So we really encourage you, looking at your birds, thinking about just everyday things you can do together. You don't have to set aside this intensive period where it's just you and your bird and you're just going to bond. That's really not necessary. Just think about ways of including them and incorporating them into your daily life activities, your family activities. You can, if they're not getting as much attention and maybe they were off in a room by themselves, maybe bring them to where the family gathers more so they get more attention. Just talking to them as you go by. Um, Dancing, a lot of birds like to dance. Be silly, goofy. It's good exercise for you and the bird. Singing, eating together. A lot of birds eat with their flocks, so showering, traveling together, a lot of places you can even bring your bird on vacation. Some vacation rental by owners and Airbnbs I found will sometimes let you bring your birds if you talk to them and clear it with them in advance. So there's just different things that you can do just to incorporate them into your daily life. Now, something else that we can think about with a collection of individuals living under the same roof, and I think what has happened recently with COVID-19 and the stay home orders that a lot of people have been under is a lot of people were spending even more time at home. And so that sense of personal space is even more important, right? Because maybe you were home more, maybe you were working from home, maybe your spouse was too, maybe the kids were also home doing their homework and schoolwork online because everything was going online. And so that sense of personal space becomes even more important, right? Well, birds, of course, have a sense, even though they're social and we're social, and it's one of those things I think that, appeals to us about them because we're social animals and they are too. And it's just amazing to have this social relationship with a bird that is of a different species. But I also like to think about natural behaviors and thinking about how there's going to be some natural instincts that you're kind of going against the tide if you're trying to eliminate them. Try to instead work with them, give them good ways of expressing natural behaviors without them leading to dysfunctional things in your home. So a bird's space, which can be their cage in a lot of ways, their own cage, their own room. Let them have their room, their cage. They sometimes can get very protective of it. And different species of birds can be more protective of their cage. So respecting that and giving them choices and allowing them to make decisions on their own about where they go and what they do, to as much as we can be a wonderful way of building trust and a good relationship with them. But so letting them come out of their cage on their own, not sticking our hands in the cage to get the bird, which many years ago we were taught, but just opening the door and letting them come out on their own so they have even that choice to make. Am I going to leave my cage or am I going to stay in? And then if they have places they can go and choose to go, either fly or climb over to, and a way to climb over to different places in the room that are place stands or places we want them to be, that are set up for them, that aren't, destroying our homes, but rather give them things to do. Having those choices too are also valuable. And we don't want to invade their cage. We don't want to stick fingers in. That's a good way to teach a bird to bite, is sticking fingers in cages, invading their space. And we are very touchy. We're mammals. We want to touch. It's a pretty bird. They look soft. We want to stick fingers in. So resist the urge, and let them come out on their own and wait until they're out to service their cage too. So you're not invading their space in order to clean. So those are some things, just kind of going with the natural behavior to kind of set that up for success. Just having that comfortable environment for them where they feel they have the choice of coming and going. We all like that feeling of being able to choose where we are, right? I think that's another thing that the stay-home order showed us. Probably the best insight we have into what their lives may be like a lot of times, because they are limited in their choices and we were limited in choices. And that can be very sad, but just think about how many choices. Can you improve the number of choices that your bird has?
Apple? Hey, Myra.
I hope you could see that. I'm going to play the video one more time. We're just talking about showing an example of body language here.
Apple? Hey, Myra.
So yeah, I mean, sometimes if anyone lives with macaws, you may have seen a similar behavior, the kind of chewing on the toenail, foot up to the mouth kind of thing. It's not a bird I would ask or force to do something right now. It's probably actually a bird I would take a step back from. So just watching their body language sometimes and giving them that choice. There's a generalization that you should move slowly around birds, but it's really more than that. It's really, if you're coming towards a bird and either a bird is leaning back, if I see a bird leaning back as I'm coming towards, I'm going to take a step back. And kind of on the same note, if I see a bird leaning forward as I am coming forward with their beak open and their feathers slicked back and their eyes round and wide as saucers, I'm also going to take a step back. So just reading their body language and essentially, respecting what their body language is trying to communicate, that maybe they're not comfortable with you being right there. They'd like you to take a step back, give them more space. And so, because when we think about it, wild parrots always have a choice of where to go, and they have so many choices. And our birds do have limited choices. So, again, thinking about what we can do to add more choices and let them choose as much as possible. I also like to use the example, if you are at work in an office, again, pre-COVID, and your boss comes into the room, you really can't get away. You could go to the other side of the room, maybe look out the window, but he knows you're there or she knows you're there. And it's not like you can just get away. And it's the same kind of with a bird in our homes. Just be mindful of the fact that there's only so far they can go. We're still there. And again, not to dwell on the negative, but just think about that and giving them as many choices and respecting their decisions too, not forcing them. Because we want to empower them. We want to make them feel like they have a say in what they do and what they, as long as it's safe, of course. But let them are empowered to make those choices and have control over how close we are and that kind of thing. So parrots need other parrots. So birds, we're just very different from birds. I think there's nothing more enriching than having another bird in the home. But of course, there's some caveats. Birds are very social, and a bird in the wild alone is very vulnerable. So birds tend to have other parrots specifically, not just birds. Sorry, parrots in the wild tend to have other parrots around. They're very vulnerable if they're by themselves. So just thinking about that, it is good for their maybe mental health to know that there's another bird. They're looking for cues off of you and other birds at all times. So other birds provide that social interaction and some needs that we can't provide for them. Not saying you should get your bird a mate, just saying that sometimes often having another bird in the house can be beneficial and enriching for them. But of course, we want to keep it safe. There can be antagonistic relationships with other birds, and they can also, sometimes birds, when they're hand reared, as a lot of them in our homes are, they don't know really how to be birds. So they don't know how to interact with other birds. Sometimes, just like with training and teaching them how to behave in our home and how to interact with us, sometimes we have to shape that behavior with them, even being around other birds. We want to keep it safe. We don't recommend putting any two birds in a cage together unless the birds choose to move in together. And even then it's not like I'm going to put two birds in a cage that I had bought for one and just have half the space that I need for birds. They really need double the space. And it's back to the whole family together all the time, right? Concept. During stay-home orders, if you're working, sleeping, going to school all in the same space, you need to get away from each other sometimes and make sure there is double, the space for that. And we don't recommend putting different species in the same cage, of course. That could be disastrous as well. With the same species, it can be problematic, and that's why we don't always recommend it. Think about things like, are the birds from the same continent? There are theories about that, there could be some disease immunity and some disease carriers if they're from different continents. There's a whole theory that's related to how diseases evolved, and that if a disease evolved on a continent, some species from that continent may be immune to it and be carriers for it. And if you get them together in a room with birds from another continent that don't have that immunity, they could be more susceptible. Just one theory out there. Another part is just they may have different instincts or things depending on what they're like in the wild. So some New World birds, or birds from Central and South America, parrot species, often they go off and they raise young, of course, just with a member of the same species. But if they're eating at clay licks or together, or even hanging out in trees in the morning, there may be multiple parrot species in that tree. Versus Old World birds from more Africa and Australia, Indonesia, they could be in large groups often of the same species and with less intermingling. There's always exceptions, but that's just something to think about too in researching. And you can go to the World Parrot Trust site, parrot.org, and they have an encyclopedia. You go down to the footer on their site and you can go to their encyclopedia and look up the species that you have and learn a little bit about them in the wild. So this is a video of wild Nandays in Brazil. You gotta love a bird feeder in Brazil, right? Because you get Nanday conures and macaws and stuff instead of cardinals and blue jays like we get. But just look at the big group and you see them in a big group like that. Sometimes at different parts of the day, there may be other birds in the trees as well, but they eat and, kind of move together in these big groups. So just think about in our homes, some of the behaviors we see in the wild and the instincts that may be there. So we'll think about with family, the social interactions too. Of course, you're not going to have the same relationship with every member of the family, and that's okay. It's okay if they don't like everyone, whether it's a human or animal. Now, granted, we do think that if there is a human, you can always build a relationship. You can make it more positive. And Steve Martin, the animal trainer, not Steve Martin, the banjo playing comedian, has a great tip starting to build trust if you don't have a good relationship with a bird in the home. And that's just go by and drop a favorite treat in the bowl every time you walk by. Don't look at the bird. Don't stop and say hello or anything. Just let them know that when you're coming, you're not asking anything from them. They'll just start associating you with good things coming. And that's just one tiny little baby step on the road to building that trust and building a relationship. And think about, again, having the bird as part of the flock. So take time for them to participate in all the social activities of the family and see the family as part of the flock. And think about one-person birds. Okay, I hope you don't have a one-person bird in your home. We always think about what our relationship is with our birds. Do we have kind of a parent-child relationship? Is it mates? Does that bird see you as a mate, or are you friends? Really what we strive for is the friends, because it's kind of a collegial, more equal footing relationship. If you have a bird that sees you as a mate, that could be, think about, are there things that you're doing that are encouraging that? And is it kind of detrimental or harming the relationship that your bird could have with other family members or in that bird keeping its home? Because, that mate, behavior can lead to that pair bond. We really don't want to have a pair bond with our birds because it actually leads to a lot of dysfunctional behaviors. So you don't want to pet your bird anywhere other than the head. Petting a bird down its back and under the wings is going to second base. And it can be very frustrating because you cannot go off and raise young with your bird. So it is sending them the wrong message. It is making promises that you are not going to fulfill and should not fulfill. So it can be very frustrating. And so we recommend don't pet your bird down the back or under the wings. We actually have had an issue once in which a bird was adopted into a home, had a great relationship with both members of the couple, was doing really well, and then child came home from college and the child started petting the bird, snuggling with the bird, petting the bird down the back. Suddenly, mom and dad had to die. I mean, it is natural for a bird in the wild during a lot of parrots in the wild. When I say bird, I mean parrots generally. If it is time for them to pair up and go find a nest and raise young, they're going to drive away the other parrots. They are going to, because they're competition for nesting sites and their competition for food in that area. So it is just natural, instinctual for them to try to drive other folks away. You don't want your family members to be driven away because you have an inappropriate pair bond. Your bird sees you as a mate. So that is a reason why you don't want that to happen. It also leads to other problematic behaviors too. So it definitely jeopardizes positive relationships with others in your home. It can also lead to prolapse, which you see here is actually the sex organs kind of falling out. and it requires surgery. It's very expensive and it doesn't always end well. So feather destructive behavior can also happen. They can, you know, at least try to create a brooding patch if they're ready to make a nest, or just from the frustration of you getting to second base but not finishing out the bases, um, lead to more feather destructing behavior. And also things like screaming and biting other family members, or biting you because you're trying to leave, screaming because you are leaving and you don't leave the pair, the member of the pair. You're supposed to stay in the nest, and raise these babies. So this is all why we say, be careful. If you see your bird do things like, try to bring up food for you, that's a mating behavior. Ignore it. Try to redirect it into other things. Come back. So ignore it, come back, try to do something different that has a less hands-on approach. So if I start to see that with my own birds, I try to not hold them, not have them on me. I try to maybe do some hands-off activities. That's when you can sing together. That's when you can do some target training, have them touch the target stick. You can even do that while they're still in their cage. Those kinds of things. And they do the droopy wings, sexy dance for you too. That's another sign. You don't want to encourage that. Just go away, come back later when they're hopefully, not doing that dance anymore. So also with family interactions, we want to build trust, right? So with we always want to teach the bird what to do, and we want to build trust. Whenever you're facing any kind of behavior challenge too, and looking at solutions, ask yourself, well, what does this build trust? So you want to keep it positive and reward the things you like seeing. And that means instead of waiting to respond to something that you don't like, which just then reinforces the thing you don't like, if your bird is in the room and playing with a toy, say chewing up a wood piece or ringing a bell, you can encourage them to continue doing that by praising them, by giving them a treat. That teaches the bird what to do, what behaviors you like seeing. But also have realistic expectations. And, it's just that setting ourselves up for success too. So for instance, we're going to see a video in a little bit of Ben. Ben is a little blue crown conure who, he didn't want to be touched. Some birds' hands are really freaky, and they look really weird. Birds don't have hands, right? So he did not want, if he saw a hand, he would often, move away from the hand. So that was body language to us that he did not want to be touched or step onto a hand. Instead, we taught him to step up onto a perch. He did not have problems with perches. You can still have a great relationship with a bird, even a bird that doesn't want to be touched. But that is setting both him and us up for success, because that way we can get him from point A to point B when needed. It's a behavior that is a lot more comfortable instead of working against, something that is less comfortable for him. So we want to train and reward the positive behaviors. So always, always, always reward the positive behaviors, the things we like to see. And of course, punishment doesn't build trust. It also doesn't teach the bird what to do. So again, looking at these things, always teach the bird what to do instead. Another great thing to do if you are facing any kind of vocalization issues with the birds, if you have birds that scream, having a contact call with them is a wonderful thing to do that feeds into, again, going with the natural behavior rather than fighting against it. Because often, if a bird is calling for attention or calling for you, they often don't start with a really loud scream. It's often much quieter first. And it's the same if I'm in the kitchen or something and whatever I'm doing, I can't leave. Maybe I've got something boiling over on the stove or something that I'm tending to on the stove. If I need My husband's attention, I'm going to say his name. And if he doesn't answer, I'm going to say it louder. And if he doesn't answer, I'm going to say it louder. And it's the same with the bird. They'll start at a quieter level, and then if they don't hear back from you, it'll keep getting louder. So often if you can create a contact call, and that's a noise that you always respond to. When you hear them do it, if you are within earshot, you respond to that noise. And it's a noise that you like hearing, is appropriate and acceptable in your home. It could be a whistle, it could be a song, it could be a whisper, it could be a tap. It's also important to have those contact calls if your bird ever does get out and is, loose, because sometimes having that contact call can keep you knowing where he is. And I know of several people who that is what helped them get their birds back, is they had that contact call. So I hope you never experience that, but if you do, make sure you have that contact call and always respond to it and that they respond to you.
What a good bird. Thank you, Ben.
So there you see, exactly, Ben, no problem stepping onto that perch. Lots of trust in stepping onto that perch, but it would have been a much longer road and training if we were waiting, holding out for him to step onto a hand. Okay, so when you're looking at behavior challenges at home, there's a variety of things we can do, right? Different perches. So this is just a nice little graph to kind of go over some of them. And we talked earlier in the health section about how sleep can be important. So that can be the first thing. If you're noticing a behavior change, sometimes you want to make sure that they're healthy, that they're getting enough sleep, that it's not a deficiency of some kind going on. And that's a very uninvasive, unintrusive way of looking at it and trying to fix it, trying to help them get more sleep, for instance. The next one is, can you change something in the environment? Sometimes we do get the question like, my bird attacks my feet whenever he's on the floor. And usually our response to something like that is, well, is there something that you can do to change the environment so that your bird's not on the floor? If he likes to forage and stuff, can you have something on a table, something very interactive and fun for him to do so that he's not down on the floor chasing your feet? Sometimes that's all it's needed to fix the problem. So sometimes you can just change something in the environment, or, time also impacts, me too. I know that I make sure that all of my birds return to their cage at a certain time, because if it gets too late, then I start seeing undesirable behaviors. But by making sure that everyone has an incentive, a favorite treat, an encouragement to go back before that happens, I don't get those undesirable behaviors. The next one is positive reinforcement. And again, teaching the bird what to do, instead of looking at it as, how do I teach them from eating the cabinets? What do you want them to do instead? You want them to stay on the play stand? Reward them for staying on the play stand. Reward them for, if they need to chew something, make sure they have something fun to chew, on that play stand. And going with that natural behavior, but a better expression of it, something that you can live with. And then we also have, so those are the best practices, and those are our first course of action in dealing with any kind of behavioral intervention. And then the others, we try to avoid because they break trust. Okay, so labels. We're also thinking about family and labels. Labels, one thing that I will say about labels is we often use what are called labels, which are actually interpretations of why something is happening, when we don't really know the why. It's a guess. We're not in the bird's head, so we don't really know. And a lot of times, if a behavior is happening, and we're not sure why, maybe we'll say the bird is hormonal, the bird is angry, the bird is whatever, and all of those labels mean different things to different people. So we try to avoid them really, and instead just describe what is happening, what happened before, what in the environment allowed it to happen, and what happened after. We try not to force our birds. I mean, another reason why we want to empower them, we want them to have choices and feel like they have input and actually have input on what they do and what every day is. Force can lead to undesirable behaviors like biting or screaming, and it can also lead to learned helplessness. So I know many years ago we were taught to teach a bird to step up by shoving our hand into their chest so that they had no choice. They would either step up or they would fall backwards, on their perch, essentially. Of course, some birds learn to bite that way. The other thing is, or some birds will learn, well, I may as well just step up because you never listen to me anyway. We always want them, that's not the relationship any of us want to have. We want the bird to step up because they want to come to us, right? Because they trust us and they know we respect them. So that's just, a different way to look at it. So always think about instead the behavior. If you're facing a behavior challenge, what behavior do you want to see instead? What do you want them to do, right? And then provide them that opportunity to do that. Set the environment up so that instead of, if you don't want them to chew the cabinets, they have a play stand and they have stuff to chew there. And give them lots and lots of reinforcers for doing the other thing. Reward all those desired behaviors. Don't take them for granted. If a bird steps up for you, reward them. Give them a treat. Give them praise. If they're on that play stand and they're destroying toys there, reward them. Give them praise. Give them treats. Never take that for granted. And of course, the Behavior Works website has lots of articles and other resources about behavior as well. Okay, so we've made it through the first 3 sections, and the next one is going to be about home being a place for opportunities. And before that, you may want to go ahead and do the activities that are associated with this section. And I'll see you back a little bit later for the last section, which is the part on home being a place for opportunities. Thank you.